Great players don't appear out of nowhere. The trajectory was there. In the spin rate, the prospect report, the contract structure, long before the world noticed. We find that trajectory every morning, pull the 3 stories that are actually moving the game, and break down what they mean before the day gets away. This is Streak Plot Baseball. Let's get into it. Here's the most important thing I can tell you about Michael McGreevy's contract situation. The gap between his ERA and his underlying numbers is not a story about how good he is. It's a story about when, not if, the number's correct, and whether his camp can turn a mirage into a market reality before that correction arrives. McGreevy is a pre-arb player earning $800,000. He's posting a 2.40 ERA over 56 innings, and that number is going to attract attention from every fantasy analyst, every casual fan, and every front office that does not look under the hood. His camp's job right now is to find a team that will pay for the ERA line before the ERA line disappears. That is the entire arc of this negotiation, and the clock is running. Let me lay out why the gap matters so much in contract terms. His xERA is 5.85. That's a 3.45 gap, 3.5 runs better than the underlying contact quality justifies. Over 56 innings, that kind of variance is not small sample noise. It's a meaningful divergence that StatCast and contact quality metrics both support. Hard hit rate against is over 41%. Barrel rate against is north of 10%. Hitters are hitting the ball hard against McGreevy. The ERA says they're not succeeding. But ERA and outcomes are going to converge. That is a near certainty. And when they do, what the market sees in August and September will look nothing like what it sees today. Here's the additional layer that every agent and every front office analyst will price into this evaluation. McGreevy routinely outperforms his xERA. His career average gap is nearly a full run, meaning in a normal season, you'd expect him to run about a run better than the underlying metrics suggest. That's a real skill component. Some pitchers have a demonstrable ability to limit damage beyond what contact quality alone predicts. McGreevy has shown that pattern, but the current gap is 3.45. His baseline explains maybe 90 basis points of that. The remaining 2.5 runs of ERA suppression are borrowed. They will be returned. What does that mean for his contract clock? McGreevy is in a walk year at $800,000, pre-arb minimum. He has accumulated service time, and depending on exactly where he falls in the service time calculation, he is either approaching his first arbitration year or already eligible. If he's heading into arbitration after 2026, the number that matters is the ERA line he's carrying into that filing. And that number could look very different in October than it does today. In arbitration, pitchers are largely evaluated on traditional statistics: ERA, wins, strikeouts, innings. The system leans heavily on what you can see rather than what the underlying metrics say should have happened. A pitcher with a 2.40 ERA over a full season has an arbitration case. A pitcher with a 5.50 ERA, which is closer to where McGreevy's numbers may land if the regression arrives on schedule, has a much weaker one. His camp needs to understand that the arbitration panel is not going to credit him for a 4.23 FIP if the ERA is running 5.5. They're going to see the ERA, the opponent contact quality, and the declining velocity, and they're going to price accordingly. That velocity number is something I want to spend a moment on because it matters beyond this season. McGreevy is sitting 91.4 miles per hour, down 1.6 from last season. That is not a trivial decline. A starter who loses 1.5 miles on his fastball in a single offseason and is now sitting in the low 90s is a pitcher whose stuff profile has changed. The hard contact numbers confirm it. Hitters are ambushing the fastball. The ERA has not reflected that yet, but the barrel rate and hard hit rate are telling you what the pitch quality actually is right now. When you combine a velocity decline with elevated contact quality and a home run rate over a per 9, you have a pitcher whose profile is moving in the wrong direction. That is a sell high situation, and the window to sell is measured in weeks, not months. Here's what McGreevy's camp should be doing right now. If there is any conversation happening about an extension, and the Cardinals have the luxury tax space to make one viable, they are sitting on over $120 million in available space, the time to negotiate that extension is this week. Not in August, not at the trade deadline, this week. A team that watches McGreevy's ERA normalize from 2.40 to somewhere closer to 5 over the next 2 months is going to offer a very different number in September than they would offer today. His camp needs to leverage the current narrative aggressively. A 2-year extension at something in the $3 to $4 million range would lock in value for McGreevy and give St. Louis cost-controlled innings at a discount relative to the market. And that deal makes sense for both parties right now, precisely because the ERA illusion is intact. If no extension conversation materializes, the strategic goal becomes maximizing the arbitration filing number. That means every quality start between now and August matters, not because it validates his true talent level, but because it creates a filing argument. 6 quality starts is already a meaningful data point. If he can get to 9 or 10 by the end of the year while keeping the ERA under 4, the arbitration case has real teeth, even if the underlying numbers tell a different story. Arbitration is not a pure talent evaluation. It's a filing exercise with traditional statistics as the primary exhibit. The Cardinals' context is worth noting from a risk management perspective. They have the financial flexibility to absorb a projection error. If they sign McGreevy to an extension based on the current ERA line and the regression arrives, which it will, they're paying above market money for a back-of-rotation starter. That's not catastrophic for a team with that kind of luxury tax room, but it's not smart asset management either. The front office that protects itself here is the one that evaluates the underlying contact quality rather than the surface ERA, prices accordingly, and lets the market overpay if someone else wants to. For McGreevy, the window is now. The ERA is real on the scoreboard. The xERA is real in the data. Those two things cannot both be true for much longer. The money that reflects the ERA line has to be captured before the ERA line catches up to the underlying reality. That's not a moral judgment. That's contract timing. Every agent who has ever represented a player with a gap season understands this calculus. You negotiate when the optics are maximally favorable, not when they're accurate. Right now, the optics are as favorable as they are going to be for Michael McGreevy this year. His camp's job is to act on that before August takes the leverage away. When a pitcher is in the final year of a $17 million a year contract and his ERA is sitting nearly 7 runs, the story is not about this season's numbers. The story is about leverage. Who has it, who has lost it, and what the market will actually pay when the calendar flips to November. Lance McCullers Jr. is living inside that story right now, and the answer to every question in it is more complicated than the surface numbers suggest. Let's start with the contract situation because that's the frame for everything else. McCullers is earning $17 million AAV in 2026, the final year of a deal that made complete sense when it was signed. He was a legitimate front-of-rotation talent for Houston, a pitcher with a wipeout curveball, high strikeout rates, and the kind of postseason pedigree that commands premium money. The Astros built around him. He was a core piece. That version of McCullers is the version this contract was paying for. The version pitching in 2026 is a different conversation. ERA of 6.86 over 39 innings, 7 home runs allowed, a hard hit rate against north of 50%. These are not the numbers of a $17 million pitcher. But here's where the agent work gets interesting. Because McCullers' camp is not going to sell this contract year at face value, and they don't have to. His FIP is sitting under 4, his xERA is 4.39. There is a legitimate argument, a real, substantive, data-backed argument that the ERA is lying, that the contact has been bad, but the sequencing has been worse, that the underlying stuff still projects to something substantially better than what the ERA line shows. McCullers' camp is going to lean on that gap hard in any contract negotiation, and they should. A 2.5 run ERA to xERA gap is significant. It's the kind of number that creates a market inefficiency, and smart teams will price off the underlying metrics rather than the surface ERA. But here's the problem, and this is where career trajectory becomes the spine of this negotiation rather than just a footnote. The HR9 trend is not a single-season anomaly. It's a multi-year direction. McCullers' career average is already sitting at nearly a home run per 9 innings, which is elevated for a frontline starter. In 2025, he was running worse than that. In 2026, he's at 161. The trend line is climbing. That matters enormously in a contract negotiation because xERA and FIP and all the underlying metrics still have to account for a pitcher who gives up more fly balls and more hard contact as his career progresses. The stuff that allowed McCullers to strand runners and limit damage earlier in his career may not be what it was. A team paying for the xERA version of McCullers is also buying the HR9 trend, and that's a real risk that shows up in real runs eventually. The workload story compounds this. McCullers is on pace for well under 100 innings in 2026. His career average is 90 innings per season, and that number itself reflects a durability history that has followed him throughout his career. He has had significant time lost to injury across multiple seasons. A free agent pitcher who is 33 years old, which is where McCullers will be when he hits the market, with an innings pitched history that routinely falls short and a home run rate that is trending in the wrong direction, is going to face a market that prices durability risk heavily into the contract structure. Here's what the market looks like for that profile. Top of market for McCullers, if the ERA regresses toward the xERA in the second half, if he finishes with 100-plus innings, if the HR9 stabilizes, is probably in the range of $12 to $14 million AAV on a deal of 1 to 2 years. That's not the $17 million he's earning now. That's a meaningful step down. And it comes with structure that protects the team, likely with a heavy performance bonus component tied to innings thresholds, and opt-out for the team after year 1 if the durability issues persist, or both. The pessimistic scenario is worse. If the ERA stays elevated, if the second half looks like the first half, and if the HR9 continues to climb and the innings total comes in well under 100, we are talking about a deal in the $8 to $10 million range. Short term, heavily incentive-laden. Maybe a prove-it structure with a base in the 6 or 7 million range and upside bonuses that push it to 10 or 11 if he stays healthy and produces. That is a 40% to 50% reduction from his current AAV. For a player who has been earning at the top of the market for multiple seasons, that kind of reset is significant. Now, the Houston context matters here, and not in a way that helps McCullers. The Astros are sitting in the AL West with 18% playoff odds. That's not a team with unlimited incentive to pay a premium for continuity. They have $3.3 million in luxury tax space, which means they are already at the edge of their tax threshold. Signing McCullers to anything close to his current AAV would push them meaningfully into tax territory. And for a team with that playoff probability, the math on that investment doesn't work. Houston is not going to be the team that overpays to keep him. That's not pessimism about the relationship, it's just contract arithmetic. McCullers' camp needs to find a team that values the underlying metrics over the surface ERA, has rotation need heading into 2027, and has the payroll flexibility to absorb a starter in the 11 to 14 million range. There are teams in that market. Contenders who lose a rotation piece in the offseason, rebuilding teams who want to bridge a young staff with an experienced presence, or a team making a window push who needs innings. But that market is conditional. It depends on a second half that validates the xERA argument. McCullers needs to pitch, needs to get to 100 innings, needs to bring the ERA down toward 5, needs to hold the home run rate from climbing further. Every start between now and October is a negotiating session. The leverage picture is honest, but not hopeless. McCullers has less leverage than his career earnings suggest. He is pitching for a contract in a walk year with a surface number that scares general managers, a trend line that supports their skepticism, and a durability history that the market penalizes. His camp's job is to force the conversation onto the underlying metrics, manufacture second-half performance into a narrative of recovery, and find the 2 or 3 teams in the offseason market who will price off xERA rather than ERA. That's not impossible. But the window to do it is the next 4 months. The career arc says the trend doesn't reverse on its own. The pitching has to change it. Here's what Tommy John surgery means before it means anything else. It means a contract becomes a question mark. A rotation becomes a construction project. And a franchise just lost the most valuable commodity in baseball, a frontline starter in his prime. Corbin Burnes is on the 60-day IL with UCL involvement. And if you're in the business of baseball, that phrase, UCL involvement, is not a medical term. It's a financial sentence. Let's talk about what Burnes is worth and what this injury just did to that number. Burnes is earning in Arizona, and he was brought in to anchor that rotation in a window the Diamondbacks are very clearly still trying to hold open. Their playoff odds are sitting just under 50% in the NL West, and that's with Burnes on the mound. Without him, the rotation math changes immediately. But the bigger story here isn't the 2026 season. The bigger story is what happens when Burnes tries to re-enter the market after Tommy John. Tommy John surgery carries a return timeline of roughly 12 to 18 months for a starting pitcher. That's not speculation, that's the clinical baseline. For a power arm in his early to mid-30s, the recovery calculus gets more complicated. The mechanics that generated elite stuff before the procedure don't always come back at the same level. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. The market prices in that uncertainty brutally. Here's what that means in dollar terms. A healthy Corbin Burnes, the version Arizona thought they were paying for, commands top of market money. We're talking a deal in the range of $22 to $26 million AAV in this market for a legitimate frontline starter with his track record. But a Burnes coming off Tommy John, returning sometime in mid to late 2027, pitching his first full post-surgery season at age 32 or 33, the market doesn't pay that number. The market hedges. We're talking about a contract structure that almost certainly includes heavily deferred performance incentives, opt-outs tied to innings thresholds, and an AAV that probably lands in the $15 to $18 million range. And that's the optimistic scenario where the recovery goes cleanly and the stuff comes back close to what it was. Burnes had essentially 0 home runs allowed per 9 innings before this injury, which is elite. The UCL flag changes the projection. A pitcher who returns from Tommy John often sees velocity tick down slightly in the first full season back, and when velocity drops, hard contact goes up. The performance profile that generated that pristine HR9 number is the thing at risk here. That's what the market will price. From a leverage standpoint, Arizona holds almost none right now. They are the team holding an injured contract on a 60-day IL. They cannot trade this player. They cannot showcase him. They cannot use him in any way to improve their 2026 season. The leverage in any future negotiation, whether that's an extension, a mutual option, or a new deal, shifts entirely to Burnes and his representation. If the recovery goes well, he controls the narrative. He picks his moment to return, he pitches in a limited audition at the end of a season, and his camp sets the market from a position of scarcity. There are not many healthy front-of-rotation starters available. Even a successfully recovered Burnes is a premium commodity. Now let's talk about the other side of this roster domino, and this is where it gets interesting from a financial architecture standpoint. Daniel Egan is the name you need to know. He's sitting at AA right now, 2027 ETA according to the org's projection, and his fastball grades out very well for a developing arm, sitting 93 to 95 with projection. Command is still a work in progress. He was not supposed to be part of the 2026 conversation in a meaningful way. Burnes going down changes that calculation. Here's the contract story on Egan, and it's one every agent in baseball understands intimately. Every day a player spends on an active MLB roster counts towards service time. Service time is the currency of baseball labor economics. 6 years of service time equals free agency. The increments below that, 0 to 3 years, 3 to 6, determine arbitration eligibility and the salary scale a player moves through before hitting the open market. An organization managing a prospect's service time will, under normal circumstances, keep a player like Egan in the minors until a call-up is unavoidable, both to control his development timeline and to preserve that extra year of team control. A Burnes Tommy John blows that calculus open. Arizona is a contending team. They have playoff aspirations. They cannot absorb a rotation hole with a pretend solution for 4 to 6 months. If Egan is ready to contribute, even as a stretched long reliever or a spot starter in a piggyback setup, the organizational pressure to accelerate his timeline becomes real. And the moment they call him up, the service time clock starts. If he sticks, that clock keeps ticking. An early call-up could cost Arizona a full year of control on the back end of Egan's contract, which in today's market is worth somewhere between $8 and $15 million, depending on what kind of pitcher he becomes. That's the hidden cost of this injury. It's not just the innings Burnes was supposed to throw. It's the prospect timeline decision that gets forced before the organization is ready to make it. Arizona's front office has to weigh, do we burn a year of Egan's control to plug a hole now, or do we absorb the rotation pain and protect the asset? In a contending window, with playoff odds near 50%, the pressure to win pushes toward acceleration. That's expensive in ways that don't show up on a box score. The bottom line here is straightforward. Burnes absorbs the financial hit. His next deal is smaller than it would have been, almost certainly structured with more risk distributed onto his side. Arizona absorbs the roster hit and the hidden cost of an accelerated prospect timeline. The only party with genuine leverage right now is Burns's camp, which controls the pace of recovery and the timing of the return to competition narrative. If that recovery is clean, he can rebuild market value. If it isn't, this UCL flag becomes the footnote on an elite career that ended earlier than anyone expected. Watch the 6-month mark. That's when the real financial story begins. That's the read on the day. The game moves fast. The data moves faster. Come back tomorrow and we'll be ahead of it again. This is Streak Plot Baseball, where greatness is never random.